Ahoy! Today we're doing a patch notes review for patch 8.3, as well as obviously the bonus balance that comes before that. Got a lot to go through, so let's get right into it, starting with the bonus update. We already saw the skins yesterday, so we don't need to go over them again. Otherwise, you can just watch the live patch show where you can see them all. We go right into the changes. First one is the global healing reduction aura. The duration here for you being in the brawling status is reduced from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. So you have a little bit less time to heal after a fight before the healing is reduced again. Divine Ruin, I don't even need to go through them in detail here, but all of the healing nerfs are reverted. All the anti-heal items here are back to the original values, but the duration remains nerfed. That's because basically you have the not brawling effect anyways, so that keeps a bit more fair. But you see that Divine Ruin, Brothers Beatsick, Toxic Blade, Pestilence, Contagion, Shadow Steel Shuriken, well, they all got their nerfs reverted. And then Berserker Shield actually had an issue basically where apparently the price was reduced further than it was meant to be. Let's move that mic a little bit. Now it's 2,500 again. And yeah, this wasn't meant to be cheaper. Fail Not gets major nerfs and some other hunter items along with that. So the power here is decreased from 45 to 40. That's not a big hit. But the critical strike chance of the item itself is reduced from 20% to 10%, which is massive. And along with that, the critical strike chance when an enemy is marked is increased from 15 to 20%. But that will not offset the nerf because you're not always boxing into an enemy with your ultimate applied to them and them being marked. So in most situations, this will result in significantly lowered DPS. And the only time that you can benefit from this is if your allies have like a slightly high crit chance while attacking the enemy, but really that's not what you're building or using the item for. I find it interesting that they didn't touch the penetration or cooldown reduction on the item. I think those would have been better spots to remain it, like to keep it a viable crit item while also taking away something from it. But it seems that they want it to be more in that direction and less in the crit direction and just have the crit as a little bit of bonus. I think with the crit rate being reduced by so much, it'll be picked up less than before. How much less, we yet have to find out because it is still very beneficial due to the percentage pen that it offers. And I would have thought that they just take it when they 10% pen and then, you know, make it just a CDR crit item, but that's not the way we're going, and I kind of find it hard to judge how it'll work right now, but I could definitely imagine that this drives us away from the fail not first meta, where that's the first item you build after boots, basically. Berserker Shield also gets nerfs, no surprise here, also an extremely strong item at the moment. Cost increased by 100 gold, along with that the physical power is reduced from 50 to 40, and the attack speed is reduced from 20 to 15%. These are not massive nerfs. This item will also still be good. It still has the pen, it still has overall good stats, it still has some defense, and it still has everything else. It's just a little bit lower. Especially the power was weirdly high for an item that also offers so much attack speed. And it was also fairly cheap, so these nerfs are completely appropriate in my opinion. And the only awkward thing is that I think the price step here from the tier 2 to tier 3 will now be really high. Yeah, but I think it's still very valuable on a lot of characters regardless of the nerfs now. And if it's not like rushed quite as much in 3 rolls, I think that's not necessarily a problem either. Very interesting change here is Spectral Armor getting a buff, decreasing the amount of damage that crits deal to you when you have this item from 50 to 40%. Spectral Armor in the competitive scene was already very valued. In the SCC we actually saw that used a lot because it is just the best crit counter, but now apparently it's an even better crit counter, and that I think is the biggest concern for crit builds right now, more so than the nerf to fail not even, that Spectral Armor is so valuable that a lot of comps could just go into Spectral Armor if you choose to go crit and kind of negate a lot of your impact that way. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out for hunters. Archmage's Gem gets a nerf as well, I would say. It is a change, but it is a nerf for many characters, decreasing the magical power scaling from 2% to 1.5%, meaning the total and maximum stacks goes from 40% to 30%, and increasing the magical power at the same time from 100 to 120. So it works a little bit better with gods that have high scaling abilities, but it takes away from the initial burst, and that's why most characters build it. That's why you use it on Noel, that's why you use it on Morrigan, that's why you use it on Scylla. You just want to have that the quickest damage in the quickest combo possible, and that is reduced now. So yeah, might open up the window a little bit more for alternative options, but I think a lot of people are still, even after this, are still going to value Archmage's gem a lot, even partially just basically for nostalgia, and partially because it has a very strong tier 1, and then also partially because of just wanting that feeling of having more burst right at the start. Apollo gets a nerf to Across the Sky, decreasing the power scaling from 40% per tick to 30% per tick. I think this may actually be a revert. I'm trying to remember. I think they buffed the scaling of the ult at some point last year. But either way, Apollo will definitely need nerfs, and this pressure that he gets to the ultimate is extremely high. I find this to be an odd nerf, though. I thought they would have looked at the 1 potentially. I thought they would have maybe looked at the amount of mana that the ultimate uses or something. Maybe make it like percentage based. It's a suggestion that comes up often, so that he doesn't fly around that long in early stages or that far across the map. They don't want to do that. They just want to do this nerf because the other hunter nerfs are happening at the same time. But the thing is, the other hunter nerfs hit all the other hunters as well. So I'm thinking that maybe it won't do that much to Apollo, since, you know, other hunters are getting the same item nerfs as he does, and then he'll still be out on top. But we'll have to see. Danzaburou gets multiple nerfs. He had it coming once again. Fool's Gold, decreasing the base damage here from 70 to 270 to 70 to 250. So first rank is the same, but it scales slightly lower. And along that, Aporius Rocket, the ultimate, gets its stun duration decreased, scaling up from 1 to 1.4 seconds previously to now being 1 second at all ranks. I think this is very crucial, since it means that he doesn't set up his own combo as easily after the ultimate on higher ranks, and you have some time to get out. I always felt that it was a bit unrewarding to beat the ultimate. At the same time, you kind of had to do it, and that might not be the case, especially if you have some CCR or something as well. So yeah, I think those are good nerfs. I would have liked to see the 2 nerfed. I would have liked to see maybe the health of the flask nerfed, or the amount of time that it takes for him to taunt an enemy nerfed, because I think the 2 is very, very potent still, and a very impactful ability. And at the end of the day, I can definitely say that my prediction for Danzaburou when he first came out was right. He did not have the same stats as Tsukuyomi initially, but it's most certainly a god that has performed very, very well for a very long time. He's been a very strong hunter, and has to have had many nerfs already, and I could still see more nerfs in his future, even though we might see the metas change with this patch, and that might impact him, because I think he's somebody, for example, who likes a meta where fail not is strong, more so than Apollo even, who does like that as well, but he's a little bit more ability based as well. And if he can't rush fail not, and well, he can still rush it, but it's not as rewarding for him, then maybe that'll take him down a notch in other ways. Then we have Cu Chulainn. Cu Chulainn gets multiple nerfs as well, because he's been very present for a very long time. So Berserk here gets a physical power increase reduction from 3% to from 3 down to 2 per level when transformed. This is something that was suggested for a while, because he just becomes a little bit overwhelming when going into Berserk with the shield, with the extra power that he gets, and this should take that down a notch. And along with that, Barbed Spear and Ground Slam both get a nerf on the base damage, down from 75 to 315 to 65 to 305, so 10 flat. Just a little bit less oppressive in early game through that especially. I think these nerfs are appropriate. I think these nerfs will not ruin the character. I think he will still be a good character in the current meta, and I think he needed to be taken down a notch, and I think that's happening. I think this is the level of nerfs that you want to see on a strong performing god and on a top solo laner. They'll take him down, and then they can readjust from there if it's still too much. Guan Yu, by the way, does not get any nerfs this patch. I know he's like the other contender of solo lane, but that's probably primarily because anti-heal is getting buffed again, so that might take him down a little bit anyways. Then Scylla gets multiple nerfs as well. She performed very, very well, primarily because of Conrad Gem, in my opinion. I mean, she's popular because of Worlds, maybe, but I think her main popularity just came out afterwards when Conrad Gem just made her so strong and took away a lot of the weakness that she otherwise has in early game. So now we will see Sikkim being nerfed a little bit, with the scaling being decreased by 5% from 80 to 75%. Nothing big. And Crush also gets a 5% scaling reduction from 90% to 85%. And the magical protection reduction, it says magical protection here, but it says decreased magical protection use, whatever, from 25% to 20%. So just 5% here and there, but I think it adds up a little bit. 10% scaling, take away a little bit of her burst, and she is very reliant on that burst, and then a little bit less protection reduction, which I think might almost be more impactful on certain targets. So I think that makes a pretty significant difference altogether. That should nerf her, again, much like a Cu Chulainn, to a degree that I think is reasonable. I think she was a very strong performer, and she needed some nerfs without, completely destroying her. And then with that, we have the 8.2 changes covered, but we have a lot more coming in 8.3. So, first of all, we have this whole batch of skins here. You can look at all of those. We have classic Ao Kwang Kukul Khan skin that you can get for free by claiming some things during a SMITE birthday event, I think it was. And we have the Unholy Dual Ra. I want to mention that again, Rage and Caden's skin that was voted the community skin of the year, and the tier 5 Chaac. And if you haven't seen the tier 5 Chaac, I would highly recommend checking out the video of the patch notes show, because this skin looks so cool. This, honestly, I think is my favorite tier 5. And I don't even play Chaac that much, but it's just so cool. And it has so many effects. We haven't even seen all of them. Apparently his weapon upgrades as well when you get a certain amount of kills assist. So I think he's going to look really, really cool with these 3 different variations with different animations and everything. It's just really, really nice. Sobek gets his remodel. You can see the 3 card arts here. It wasn't completely finished yet during the patch notes, so we have to look at it on PTS as well. But so far it seems really cool, so I'm happy with that. And that brings us down here to where we got first. Okay, this is just a schedule. We have the new battle pass, which is all the cutesy, fluffy, plushy, whatever skins. One of them that I really like is a Necromancer Shankui skin, which has a frog theme. And we're going to the changes. So we have an NA West server region. We were testing this again on PTS. There were some issues with that before, apparently. And now you can choose NA West, and it'll be a smaller region because apparently Smite's a very NA East dominant game. But it should help a lot with the annoying ping over there. So I think that's very cool. And as someone who plays from OCE, I also think it's very cool. So I'm going to give it another try, and hopefully it works a little better. The goddess who shall not be named is renamed. So there will no longer be any demonetization problems on YouTube, hopefully. She is renamed to ESET instead, specifically because of YouTube and maybe other platforms, because there were some issues with the old name where it just didn't quite catch on in the algorithm, basically. And since she has a lot of different spellings of her name, this is pretty fine, apparently. And also, along with that, Mayan is changed to Maya, because that's apparently the proper term. I did not know this. So, yeah. We got a new goddess. She's just renamed, but whatever. We got a few fixes here. I think there's nothing too crazy in there this time, as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure if they fixed the crash issue yet with the minions. It does not mention that. I hope they did, but there's a crash issue at the moment that can cause the game to crash because of some minion mesh being missing, which is really annoying. Yeah, various fixes here, some for Tiamat as well, but also nothing too big here. Nothing. Well, the serpents being damage immune apparently would have been an annoying one, but most of these are relatively minor this time, I think. Just kind of having a look over just to see if I'm missing something, but I think these are all really niche issues. Seer of the Jungle apparently had a bug where it could be gained permanently, so the 2 people who actually used this item were like, wow, this is so cool. And everyone else didn't even know about it. So there's that. And that brings us to the full changes. First of all, the item reworks. First of all, that is the Sage Stone gets a rework. Forgot this item existed. These are the new stats: 50 health, 20 magical power, 15 physical magic protection, 1,400 gold. Nothing too crazy here. But the big deal is obviously the upgrade, and that's Stone of Fall. 2,500 gold, 150 health, 35 magical power, 30 physical and magical protection. Passive: when you hit an enemy god with a basic attack, you have to hit them. Important. You gain a stack of Fal's Blessing, giving you 2% damage mitigation per stack. At 3 stacks, you gain double the damage mitigation and 20% CCR, not CDR, crowd control reduction. This effect lasts for 10 seconds. I'm not sure what happens if you basic attack enemies after, if it just refreshes or what happens, but either way, very interesting mix of stats. Obviously, magical guards only here. If you're thinking of some crazy basic attack, whatever, I don't know. Probably better off not doing that, but anyways. This is a very weird mix of stats, I gotta say. The protections for that price are not the highest. The health and protections are decent, but not the highest. But that's because you get mitigation along with it, which is great. It also doesn't have that much power, to be honest. But you have to do basic attacks to the enemies first to apply the mitigations. What they said on the patch notes is this is great for supports and for guardians specifically. Now, what I gotta wonder here is which supports do frequently basic attack. I am assuming that this will likely not work on Jormungandr or on Fafnir. I mean, it could technically, but I feel like it's a lot more likely that it doesn't in their breathing stances. And outside of that, you have a few where you can use it. You could think of, like, say, Ymir, who uses basic attacks. Athena, who's got her ranged basic attacks. Speaking of ranged basic attacks, Sylvanas. Maybe someone like Capri, who kind of just can weave some basic attacks in here and there. But I don't think I would want on Capri. So I think it's a bit strange. I think it's a strange combination. I think it still will probably be more of a niche item. Tiamat obviously comes to mind. She can use it very well in her melee stance, not so well in her range stance because she has a lot of wind-ups and long animations there. And then you can obviously combine it with Oni Hunter's Garb as well for even more mitigations. I feel like in many situations you need other things more than the effect of this. You need more specific defenses, you need more item effects, aura effects as a support for your team, and you won't really have room for something that just procs on basic attacks. But if you find a guard that where it works very well, then it might be a very effective item because you can get up to 12% mitigation for 10 seconds and 20% crowd control reduction, which is huge overall. So yeah, kind of hard to place for me so far. I think the question mostly that comes down to do we find enough guards that have a purpose for it that can utilize it well, and if fire breathing guards can use it, because if they can, then for them it's absolutely ridiculous, of course. If not, it's completely terrible for them, so it's kind of hard to say. The other rework is Mail of Renewal. So Mail of Renewal also gets a completely new set of stats and everything. It's now 2,400 gold, 300 health, 15 HP 5, 20 magical and physical protection. Along with that, this passive is messy. When you are hit by an enemy guard, and this doesn't specify basic attack or ability, so probably both, you gain a stack up to once a second, increasing your protections by 4. Maximum of 5 stacks lasts 5 seconds each. At maximum stacks, upon being hit, you're immediately healed for 15% of your maximum health. Allies within 35 units heal for 15% of their maximum health over 20 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 60 seconds. So there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, what's not completely specified here is if this will work on dots. If this works on dots, it could be very interesting as counters to certain guards. the first one that chat told me about earlier was Sylvanas. That would be amazing. If it procs against Sylvanas too, then this item is absolutely insane against Sylvanas, because his 2 lasts for 5 seconds and ticks 1 per second. So if it applies with that dot, then every time Sylvanas hits you with a 2, you get a free heal. Along with that, other good dot gods obviously could struggle against as well, like Shang-Kui or something. But the problem outside of those scenarios is that it's complicated to use it effectively. Because what you want to do, obviously, is engage on the enemy in order to get the sustain, in order to get the healing. But that also means you have to voluntarily go into the enemy and take a lot of damage. And the radius of this is just 35 units. And 35 units is not as much as it sounds. So what might happen is that you get the heal yourself, but none of your teammates gets it because you're in the middle of the enemies in that very moment. That's where like a dot would kind of buff it a lot more again, because then you can take a dot from the enemy, like you can take a dot from someone like Sylvanas, and then you just back out and run to your teammates, and you get the heal for them as well. At the same time, the heal for them is also over 20 seconds, so it's not some immediate big heal. It takes quite a while to apply that heal, and in a team fight, 20 seconds is a lot of time. So it's weird. It's a weird mix of things. And also keep in mind, obviously, anti-heal would apply to this as well. The additional protections are nice, but they are barely more than reinforced shoes griefs per tick, which is 3 at the moment. And that stacks up to 7 times, so it's up to 21, while this is up to 20 protections. But then obviously this item has more base protections. What could be interesting is this as a solo lane item. If you are looking to build super defensive in early game, and you say, I'm not looking for that early aggression, early clear, I just want to get to late game with a nice item for my team, and I don't want to die, because this is kind of similar in some ways to Stone of Gaia. It has 100 less health, but it has 20 protections each. It provides more protection when you get hit. It has 10 less HP 5, and it doesn't have the healing passive. So if you're against a knock-up, knockback guard or something, Stone of Gaia is definitely better. But if the enemy doesn't have that, then you get a decent amount of protections, and you get the occasional big heal if they're trying to box you. And if you combine that with Warding Sigil and Reinforced Shoes, then you get so many protections so early in the game whenever you get hit by something that, especially a god like King Arthur, would probably be very frustrated dealing with this. But at the same time, again, he's got a knock up, so you might as well go for Stone of Gaia there. But yeah, you get the idea. It's an interesting one, and I don't quite know how effective it'll ultimately be or who will ultimately use it. And honestly, I could see this going either way. I could see, like, if it procs against Sylvanas in the way that it could proc, then I could see it being picked up against certain gods quite a fair bit, just to specifically counter them and mess with their damage in a really bad way, because they can't really stop it. Like, you know, maybe pick it against Aphrodite or something as well. If that's not the case, it might be a very awkward item to use. So it's somewhere in between, and I don't know which direction I would place it in for now. So we'll see about that in the future. Both of these items are kind of odd in a way, and kind of have to find their place first, but are definitely interesting. I'd say especially Mail of Renewal has an interesting mix of stats overall, and if you find good situations to apply it, then it could be very good. I mean, you can also combine it with Stone of Gaia and just sustain endlessly, but, well, the downside here is obviously that the effect can only apply once every 60 seconds, and anti-heal just ruins it. Different from Stone of Gaia, where you just back out and you will still sustain a lot. This only really happens in the fight, so anti-heal will be applied to. Attack speed items are getting changed. I was actually planning, and I'm very happy that I didn't do that, to make a video where I go through all the attack speed items and test which ones actually stack with each other. But apparently, a variety of items was not meant to stack with each other. So Mannequin Scepter and Mannequin's Mace and stuff were not meant to stack with other items. So now the attack speed slows actually apply the way they're meant to be. Attack speed slows will no longer stack, instead choosing the strongest attack speed slow to apply. So if you're affected by Witchblade and the Kaivo... Oh, thank you very much for the sub, Brandai. Much appreciated. Then you will end up not getting both, you will just end up getting either, like, you know, if you have Witchblade, then Witchblade overrides Archival unless you have full stacks of Archival, in which case Archival applies the stronger attack speed slow, and then it overrides Witchblade. And the items that are listed here are now Archival, Mannequins, Midgardian, Witchblade, Frostbound, etc. So it doesn't tell us anything about like how relics will play in here or something. But I'm assuming, since it says etc., it'll just apply for all the attack speed slows, which was meant to be the case at some point, but then for some reason wasn't for a lot of items, like even like Witchblade and Midgardian, I think. And now they all don't stack. I think that is good for consistency, because it means they actually work the way it's described to. But I don't think it's inherently good that they work that way. What I would like to see is the possibility to stack multiple attack speed slow items, because you can stack multiple attack speed auras as well. I don't see why it's just a one-way street. And most attack speed slows aren't that massive. Most of them are like around 20%, so they're not exactly ruining your game if you have them. But what I would like to see is that a possibility to stack them, but with a restriction on how low the base attack speed can go. So that, say, you will never be lower than 75% of your base attack speed. Or have something where the more attack speed slows you have, the less they are applied. Just make it like movement speed, where you apply diminishing returns at certain points and it's only 70% of the reduction, and then it's less and less and less. I don't see why all of these items cannot stack, because sometimes you are just against an attack speed heavy comp, and you would like to build Midgardian and Frostbound, or you would like to build Witchblade and Frostbound or something, and it would make sense. And now you can't do that. Now all of these items counter each other, and I think that's counterintuitive when there are so many attack speed slow items in the game, much like there are so many attack speed increase items in the game. Like, we have, like, whatever, Hunter's Cowl and War Flag, and I think Talisman of Energy, I think, all provide attack speed, movement speed, attack speed, whatever. And they all stack. So why can they stack but the reductions can't? Like, I understand that there needs to be a limit to that. I understand that you can't just infinitely stack all the slows, because then at some point enemies can't attack anymore. But if you're looking to, if you want to specifically counter out the enemy basic attacker and build all of these items just to counter them out, you counter no one else, just the basic attacker, then I think it would be fair that at that point you counter the basic attacking god. That's all I'm saying. That's just my perspective. But again, I think sometimes Harris has a hunter bias. This patch they didn't, with the changes overall. I think they did pretty heavy nerfs to hunters. But then there's this strange in between here where it's just, I don't know what happens there. Where they decide that this interaction specifically is not supposed to work. I don't know. I think it's weird. I think that they should just put a limiter on it somehow. Anyways, moving on. Benevolence gets its health increased from 75 to 100, and its gold per 5 increased from 2 to 3. Also, this item now has a minimum bonus gold and XP value of 1. This means that previously there were certain situations where you could get 0.5 gold, and 0.5 gold would mean that you get 0 gold, because Smite's always rounding down until you reach a full number. And this will no longer happen. Now you will always get at least 1 golden XP, and that should make this item a lot more valuable than before, because the overall value that you get out of it now, between the extra GP5 as well as the extra XP and gold that you get, should add up throughout the game, and it should be more interesting to look at now that it's actually functioning the way that you'd expect it to function. We can look into it in more detail and the upgrades soon, now that it's actually in a place we could say it's more viable. And Watcher's Gift actually, Sentinel's Gift actually gets a bit of a nerf as well. Mannequin Scepter no longer provides 3 flat damage reduction. Okay, fair enough. When you defeat a jungle monster who is burned, you restore 15 health and 15 mana. So, they now did with Mannequin Scepter what you would want on the release version of Mannequin Scepter, which is some sort of sustain for the jungle, and then you take away the flat mitigation, the flat reduction, so that it's fair, so that the item is just, you know, closer to Bambas a little bit. But it's just okay. It's okay for jungle items to have some jungle specific sustain. I think that's how jungle items should work, for them to be used by junglers. That's kind of how jungle in Smite works. Otherwise you're just running around with pots. And then if the stats are too good, then other classes abuse the item. The problem is that at this point, Mannequin Scepter has been nerfed multiple times, not because of jungle. The ticking base damage has been reduced and the attack speed slow has been reduced because of solo, because of ADC, not because of jungle. And all these nerfs are still applied to the item right now. And I don't really see much of a reason to pick it up on most. That's the thing. Like, sure, there are situations where you can pick it up now. There are certain guards that are super hyper early aggression, that just want that extra damage, and just any small difference makes a massive difference for them. Fair enough. If you're playing like I'm thinking like maybe like ability AA mix guards, like hybrid guards, like think like a Willish maybe, or but she uses Bamba's Hammer extremely well as well. So Cherio did a video recently where I played Erlang Shen with Mannequin Scepter. They can kind of make use of it, even though they also suffer now, specifically from the flat reduction being taken away, because that was kind of part of what made that item so viable for early aggression. But for most others, I don't know. I'd still rather see the other upgrades most of the time, I think. It's just that the upgraded versions of Mannequin Scepter are awkward. Like, either you get ticking damage on a basic attacker in late game, which you don't really care about, or you get burst damage in combination with basic attack damage increase, which makes absolutely no sense. And the burst damage is super low most of the time anyways. So this item remains weird. But hey, it's Mannequin for you. The next item is Eye of the Jungle. Eye of the Jungle has its magical power increased from 20 to 25, so that magical jungles can use it a little bit better early. And you also now gain 15 HP 5 and 10 MP 5 while in the jungle, whereas the base HP 5 on the item is decreased from 15 to 10. This is primarily meant to take this away from hunters, or ADCs at least, carries. And the attack speed is reduced from 15 to 10% along with that. The stats of the item are still pretty good, and I don't think any hunter just like purely built this for the HP 5 it provides. So I think it might still be okay for hunters. It's more about the upgrade that we'll get to in a second, which they might like not want to pick it up as much for. So it's an interesting change. I don't think it's going to drastically change the item. The numbers that you see here for jungle sound very high now. The HP 5 sounds very high in early game, and the MP 5 obviously helps with clearing as well. At the same time, keep in mind, this is the only sustain that the item provides. So normally you already take a fair bit of damage from jungle camps, and you go between camps very quickly. Like, whereas in lane, obviously you're dealing damage to minions, and a lot of the time you're not taking much damage from the minions. You're only taking damage when you're boxing, and now you take damage, in jungle you take damage without even boxing. So you need more HP 5 to offset that. If these values are what it ends up being, if that's how it should be, or if that's too much possibly, is another question. Because now, as it stands, all of the camps have some sort of sustain. And say, for example, with Mannequin, actually it's per jungle monster. So with Mannequin you would get like 45 health per camp usually. And Eye of the Jungle, you get 25 health every 5 seconds. So it depends a lot on how quickly you clear, and at certain stages one will be better than the other and everything. But yeah, they all have sustain now. This, I think, will push out Bambas a little bit, because I think, if every option has sustain, you're not going to go for the one that only has sustain. But then Bambas also comes with Bambas Hammer, and I think some junglers will still want Bambas Hammer, and some junglers still want to start with tier 2 boots as well. So I think we're definitely going to see some shakeups in jungle. How much they go in the direction of Mannequin, I'm not sure. It just really depends on how good the stats of Mannequin still feel after it already has so many different nerfs. And then we have Protector of the Jungle. Protector of the Jungle is, which is very good overall. The power is decreased from 65 to 55. The magical power is decreased from 100 to 80. And the attack speed is decreased from 35 to 25%. Interesting enough, the passive was not touched. So for protections especially, this is still a great item. Increasing your protections in the jungle while also providing with some physical protection. And the power of this item is actually still very high. I did some math the other day, and actually, like in a hunter build, this outscales Transcendence in terms of the total power it provides in the jungle. So yeah, you're still looking at, I think, 95-ish power in certain builds. Depends, obviously, on what exactly you're building, how much you're going into power. But it should still be solid, I would say, for a lot of guards. Maybe for junglers it's probably a little less power than that overall. But yeah, you get the idea. It should still be a pretty decent item overall. And yeah, that brings us to Sense of Time. Sense of Time is awkward because Conduit Gem exists. That's the reason, and they're trying to push it into the meta by decreasing the cost from 800 to 750 and increasing the MP5 from 5 to 10. It makes sense to increase the MP5 so it has the same base MP5 as Conduit Gem and then more over time. But I'm thinking like the real solution here would be to nerf Conduit Gem's MP5 down to 5, which is still plenty, or to 7, and then along with Lost Artifact. But instead they're just buffing Sense of Time. And I feel like we might end up in a situation where Sense of Time is suddenly ridiculously strong eventually, because it keeps getting buffed so that it can keep up with Conduit Gem, which is just probably in many situations too strong itself. So that's interesting. And with Archmage's Gem being nerfed and Sense of Time having some interesting upgrades, we might slowly see some shift in mage items. But I think it's going to take some time, especially because of the perception. I think the perception of Archmage's Gem is that it's very strong right now. And I've already done the comparison, but I think people will value it quite a lot, even for a while now. So we'll see what this shift really does. Then we have Sentinel's Gift, having its price increased from 500 to 600 to be more on the same level as the other support items. With it being the preferred support item in general, that's absolutely appropriate, no question about it. Tainted Seal, cost decreased from 750 to 700. Honestly, this could also be a 600 item. I don't even know where it's 700. Increase the physical power from 10 to 15, magical power from 15 to 20. Just giving it a little bit more early damage, because if you're building it early, especially a lot of guards are building it later and going boots first. But if you're building it early, then you should at least be rewarded to some degree for specifically going against the healer, because the healer can still go into a normal starter. Death Toll. Now this is probably one of the messiest changes here. Decreased cost from 750 to 650. Okay, that's technically a buff. But decreased health restore scaling from 0.75% of your maximum health to 0.4%. Also decreased mana restore scaling from 1.5% of your mana to 1%. Also increased the physical power from 10 to 15 and magical power from 20 to 25. It also no longer heals off of towers and phoenixes. Okay, so sustain here is almost halved from this item, but that applies to the health. The mana sustain is still pretty decent, and I think for mana specifically this is still a great option. What you have to keep in mind is that unless you're rushing Berserker Shield, many builds still go into Lifesteal along with Death Toll. Many builds still go into Devos. And if you go in Devos, then you still get some extra sustain in another way anyways. And that in combination means that it's still not bad sustain. But it does definitely make this item take a significant hit. It also still heals off of minions or of camps from outside of the area. So if you attack the Scorpion on your side of the lane as a carry, and attack it from outside of the circle, you will still heal for every basic attack without actually doing any damage or taking any damage. So I don't know why they didn't tackle that before they tackle the Towers and Phoenixes, because that was really just a niche use to shred those, but it's more an upgrade thing. But you can still use this for a lot of stupid sustain and mana return without actually putting any effort into it. So I'd rather have that removed and then the healing scaling not reduced quite as much. But yeah, they just didn't want it to sustain that heavily. And I guess it's not just a carry thing. I think it's also potentially a solo thing, where they say that, you know, it provides too much sustain in other roles as well. So yeah, it's weird. I'm not a big fan of the changes. I think the 5 power definitely does not offset the amount of sustain that you lose, and the 100 gold doesn't make a difference either. But that's what they chose to do. And what's worth pointing out is that the upgrades are still very interesting. We'll get to those very, very soon, actually tomorrow, because I was working on the video for 100 items as well already. I just wanted to wait out the patch notes because I knew there was a good chance there would be some changes to 100 items, and those did indeed happen. So yeah, that's good. Death Embrace gets the same treatment where it no longer heals off of towers and phoenixes. No changes otherwise though. So it will still give you a lot of sustain overall. Vamp Shot is very interesting. So Vamp Shot has its price decrease from 850 to 750. Decreased the health restore from 6 health to 4 health. Decreased physical protection from 15 physical protection to 10 physical protection, but increased the magical power from 15 to 25. The reasoning they gave on the patch notes was that they want this to be a mid laner item primarily, and as it stands, the item was more valuable in solo. Now, I do think that the shift from protections to power is absolutely appropriate and it makes sense. I do think that the nerf to the healing restore, the health restore, is very heavy-handed. I think 6 health for hitting an enemy with an ability wasn't that crazy for most guards. There were guards that would make decent use of this. I think one guard that really comes to mind here that effectively used this and could use the upgrades was Cthulhu. But outside of that, most mages would not use this because it just was not worth it over the other mage items. And I don't think that changes if you give it a little bit more power, but in the same breath reduce the healing. Like, 100 gold is not that much. That's 2 pots, yeah? But you're gonna have Vamp Shot for a long time. You can't just offset that with 2 pots. Like, the amount of sustain that you lose for every single ability. Like, let's put this together. Like, at the moment, on a wave, if you hit a full wave with an ability, this would heal for 36 health. And that heal is reduced to 24 per ability. That's a lot. And then if you hit a wave with 2 abilities, it's double that. So we're looking at like 24 healing reduction on that already at that point. So that's like, for example, someone like Raging would use it like that. And I don't know. To me, that's too much of a nerf for an item that wasn't even overly prominent. That was more so used in solo, but even in solo, it wasn't like solo laning Guardians with Vamp Shot were completely oppressive, as far as I'm aware. Maybe I missed something, but even in the SCC, I didn't see that. I see it being used sometimes, but not enough to justify the changes. So this is like the most out of field change that I saw in this patch. And I'd be surprised if Vamp Shot is going to be popular now. War Flag gets its duration increased from 8 to 10 seconds, and War Banner 2. This is to make it more consistent with things like Talisman of Energy. Fair enough. Not much to say about it. It doesn't drastically change the item itself. Just lasts a little longer. Chase a little longer. Excuse me. And you're getting to the Guardian. Cupid gets a change. This now has a visual and audio element on the AoE to signify if the heart bump will stun the target. And this is shown to all players. So you know if you will stun someone and they know if they'll be stunned. And I think that's a good change. Just visual clarity there. I don't know how it'll look like. We'll have to learn the new visual design for it. But I think overall, that's a change we love to see. Just understanding and ability better from both sides, basically. Because sometimes you miss out and didn't look at your passive before, and then like, well, is this going to stun or not as well? But it's primarily for the enemies, so they know if they have to beat, if they have to pre-beat. Hachiman gets the post-fire of his ultimate reduced from 0.73 seconds to 0.4 seconds. So he still can't do things immediately. He can't just dash away immediately, but the delay until he can do that after his ultimate is reduced a little bit. Set. We know that was coming. Set gets his Spawn of Set nerfed. This ability will no longer trigger item effects that activate after using an ability, specifically Hydra's Lament and, more importantly, Bamba's Hammer. If you're wondering why there was no Bamba's Hammer nerf in this patch, this is why. Set was the one who could really abuse that, and that's no longer the case, which also probably means that he's now better off getting Eye of the Jungle, I would imagine. Or maybe Mannequin even. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, find out. Anyways, Tsukuyomi does not get any nerfs though, and does not get the same treatment, which is weird to me. They said that Set was like an outlier that abuses this, but I think Tsukuyomi's one abuses it in the very same way. So I'm not sure why that didn't happen, but I guess his win rate doesn't justify it or something. So yeah, I'm not sure. Mulan gets huge changes, and I really mean huge. Like, they may not read like that big changes if you look at them and maybe you're not that familiar with Mulan, but first of all, spear thrusts increase slow duration from 2 to 3 seconds, meaning she can really walk you down, especially in the early stages of the game. Grapple, decrease cooldown from 16 to 14 seconds. I think Grapple is a very hard ability, but it's a very rewarding ability when you hit it. Being able to use that more often makes it more effective, and also means that you level it quicker because you can use it more often, so you can stack it more often. Divine Mastery, this is the most important one, this ability can now be cancelled early. You can cancel it at any point of the ability, basically, and this is massive for Mulan. Why is this so massive? Well, first of all, you don't stand still and take damage in situations where you just need to get out, but more importantly, you can use this as an escape if you play Mulan in the jungle. Mulan in the jungle was never bad, but she was kind of hindered by her ultimate, which required her to go into somewhat bruiser-focused builds in order to really be fully effective, and also hindered by the fact that her early game doesn't give her full access to her upgrade abilities. Now it does. Now you can slow enemies for 3 seconds in early game, which is pretty huge. Obviously, it doesn't give you the full abilities, but it gives you a huge gank potential through that. And you can use your ult to just dash away if you're in trouble, and then you just cancel it and you walk out, and it's a very, very long dash. So I think that drastically changes Mulan's potential. How much that will result in, I don't know, but I feel like she might really show up with this patch. I think these buffs are huge. I think these cannot be overstated, and I don't actually know where Mulan stands right now, so I don't know. I would imagine her performance statistically is probably not insane. So I'm wondering how much it will do, but definitely interesting changes here. Looking forward to that. And somebody else gets huge changes as well, and that's Athena. Athena gets a confound buff. Oh yeah, by the way, you can cancel Mulan's thing at any point. So you can even choose to, like, say, for example, use the dash and use the knock up, and then you just don't use the last damage, so you disrupt the enemy still a bit longer and stuff like that. You can do that as well. You can definitely do a lot with it. A lot. Anyways, Athena, Confound. Increase the duration from 1 second to 2 seconds to 1.2 seconds to 2 seconds, which I think is primarily nice to set up her 3-2 combo in earlier stages a little bit better, or 2-3 combo rather. Specifically so that you don't have to do the 3-2 combo if you're playing her very aggressively, because otherwise they can just get out too easily most of the time. It also, more importantly, it now deals 50 to 170 damage plus 30% scaling. So you will have more aggression potential in early game, in any lane, in any role. You will have more clearing potential if you want to. If you want to use your mana for that, you can taunt the wave and you can do damage to the wave. And you can use that obviously along with your spear throws every time as well, so that gives a lot of clearing potential overall, I would say. And what everyone will be thinking of primarily, I think, is Athena Jungle. You can use this to clear camps quicker if you need to, and you can use this to do more damage with a more damage-focused build on Athena in early game. So this is very, very interesting in my opinion, and yeah, along with Mulan, keep an eye out for Athena in the jungle now. She might just show up and do a lot of damage at unexpected times. It's not insane damage here, obviously, and it's not something you would level first if you're going for a damage Athena. But I always prefer, or most of the time, even like a jungle Athena, I prefer leveling the 2 at least at some point along with the 3 or after the 3 before the 1, because I think the longer taunt is just too valuable. And doing more damage along with that, I think, will be huge. Like, Stone of Binding Athena, Confound, that's gonna hurt. Horus, another support here, gets a little bit of a buff as well. His wings are 8% more aerodynamic. His updraft changed the cooldown from 16 to 14 seconds now down to 15 to 13 seconds, so 1 second off flat. And on Fracture, we see the same thing basically, also 16 to 14 to 15 to 13. So the combo remains on the same cooldown as well, which is nice. And yeah, I think that's going to help him. I don't know how much. I don't think that's insane, but his cooldowns were very long beforehand. So I think it's reasonable to scale these down a bit, especially because it's a more consistent scaling on the updraft now as well, which was 16, 16, 15, 15, and now it's 16, then 15, then 14.5, 14, 30.5. So I think the more linear scaling makes it better here. Ambiance Cup gets 2 buffs. He gets an extra hive that he can place, and his honey slow is increased from 20% at all ranks to 20 up to 30% scaling up with the ranks. Interesting. I don't know if it'll make a crazy difference, but I also don't think it's bad. So yeah, that's all I'll say on this for now. I think it's gonna be more annoying that he gets an extra hive. Yeah, I don't know if the honey slow alone is enough. I mean, it also depends on when you level it. I think most people don't rush the honey, so not sure about this one. Shivalanke. This one is really interesting. So, poison darts. Increased max darts enemy can hit by from 3 to 5. I didn't even know that's how it works. I never really familiarized myself too much with Shivalanke's abilities in depth. I just knew it dealt damage and had a dot. But actually, it fires... currently it fires 10 darts, of which up to 3 can hit an enemy. And then after the first shot, the additional shots only deal 30% of the damage. And the max darts are also increased from 10 to 15, meaning if you're in the area for these darts, you are much more likely to be hit because they fire so rapidly now. So it says here that this creates a smaller gap between the darts at max range, a higher likelihood of more hits at close and mid range. While that is true, more importantly, this also increases the overall damage of the ability because you can hit them with 2 more darts. And it says that they have reduced damage on extra hits, but doesn't specify any different value from the initial 2 reduced hits. So I'm assuming it's going to be the same. So I'm assuming it's going to be full damage once, and then 2 additional shots with 4 additional shots with 30% of the damage each, which in total would be 120% damage. And I did the numbers before, and I think it ends up being 126 base damage on rank 1, including the dot that ticks over 3 seconds afterwards. And I think that's huge, and I think that makes leveling the darts, at least on rank 1, on level 1, a lot more valuable, because it's just overall some of the highest base damage that you can get on level 1. It is in a dot, so it takes a little bit of time, but it's so much it's so much potential in there. And I also think that it might be interesting for Shivalanka jungle, but I think that that'll remain a niche option. But it's most certainly an interesting overall damage output for Shivalanka level 1, who's typically not meant as a level 1 god, I would say. Then we have Thor. Berserker Barrage increased physical power scaling on the final hit from 50 to 60%. Good. He needed some buffs, but I don't think it's going to drastically change him. I think 10% is just a little bit. So, Unstable Manifestation. Heat now takes longer before it starts to decay from 4 to 6 seconds. I think this is nice. Just, keep it up a little bit longer. Also has more split pushing potential that way, I think. So, yeah. I like this change. I always felt it deteriorated relatively quickly. And yeah, it's just a more re-engaged potential that way, basically, as well. Or if you miss a few basics, that's our problem. Apwash, Hollow Ground, increased the healing from 5% of maximum health to 7%. I like this. If we ever get the healing Apwash meta back, that would be hilarious. But keep in mind, anti-heal is also been buffed. So in many situations, he might actually end up healing less from them anyways because of the not brawling effect. And Corpse Explosion initial damage increased scaling from 10 to 20%. So basically, if you don't hit any corpses or just one corpse or something, it'll do a little bit more damage. Good changes, I think. Won't drastically change them overall, but I like it. And then we have Loki. Increased flurry hits scaling from 18 to 25% per hit. So the total scaling is increased from 160 to 195, or 7% over 5 hits, for a total of extra 35% scaling. Keep in mind that It sounds like a lot, but it is also a time frame in which he can't basic attack. So it kind of makes sense. I think Loki didn't really need another buff. He's actually doing quite well in some places.
Chicken.
But it seems that, well, for some reason, Hyros decided that he would get another buff anyways. And yeah, that's what we ended up with. And that's it for the patch notes. With that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you for the next one soon. If you're new to the channel, feel sub button and ring the bell. Duke Sloth, out.